So before we get going on today's episode, especially if you're tuning in for the first time, you're likely going to hear us reference the old name of this podcast, Social Proximity, as well as the old name of our YouTube channel, Board Games and Brews. I tried to chop out as much of that as possible, but some of it just could not be edited out without making things sound weird, so just a heads up on that. Anyway, if this is your first time tuning in, welcome and thank you. For any returning listeners, and equal thanks. Your listenership either way is very appreciated. Speaking of appreciation, Jessica and I would be very grateful if you would take a second and give us a 5-star review from wherever you're listening, and maybe even share us with your friends. It'd be a big help. With that, please enjoy the following episode of the Game and Drink Connoisseurs podcast. Welcome in. Thank you for checking out Beer and Bourbon Studios today. I am your co-host Bryce, and across the table from me right now is my lovely wife Jess.
Hello.
How you doing?
Pretty good. Excited to do this show tonight.
I am excited as well, and we are going to kick things off in this, our very first episode, by talking about the game Alien: Fate of the Nostromo by Ravensburger Games. This one has been out now for at least 4 or 5 months, somewhere around there. Does it belong on your shelves or at your next game night? Well, we're going to talk about it.
In keeping with the outer space theme, we're going to be taking a deep dive into Morning Liftoff, a dark roast by Sci-Fi Coffee Company, a small new roaster out of the Midwest.
With this being our first episode, thought it might be a good idea for you to get to know us a little bit, at least when it comes to the world of board games. Jess, you got me into this hobby. How long have you enjoyed modern board gaming?
Oh, gosh. Probably about a decade.
Yeah, I remember the first game you introduced to me because I was not big into games past like Scrabble, Monopoly. I didn't really know board games had gotten so big. And then you brought to the apartment when we moved in together Betrayal, House on the Hill, right?
I remember you were very resistant at first.
I didn't get it. I was all like, oh my God, there's so much game going on. How come I can't just roll dice and, move my little guy? I don't even think we finished that game. But then like a year later, we went to Palm Springs and...
Oh, yeah. We were worried that we weren't going to have anything to do in our hotel room. We would get bored or something. So we went and picked up a couple of little games at Target.
Do you remember what they were?
Boss Monster, and I think the other one was a Choose Your Own Adventure game.
It was. That's right. And we played Boss Monster, and for whatever reason, that one got my attention. And then from there, we just started really getting into the hobby. We have close to 200 games now in just, a year and a half, 2 years?
Yeah, it really just blew up, our whole collection.
Right. And for the record, I do like Betrayal at House on the Hill now. It's a good game. One of my favorites.
Yeah, you just needed probably a better introduction.
Right. Well, you know what? It probably just wasn't my style of game at that point. I think Boss Monster appealed to me because I was playing a lot of Super Nintendo back then, and I had been a fan as a kid of the Pokemon trading card game. And I think it just kind of reminded me of those two things, and that's what the jumping off point was. What about you? What kind of games do you normally like to play? How has it evolved in the last 2 years? Where are you with your favorite kind of board games right now?
Oh my gosh, I hate when people ask me that because I never know how to answer. People are like, well, what games do you like? And I'm like, I don't know. I've got 200 and I can never pick. I always want to play a different one. So I think I definitely am drawn to the Euro style, I think, and machine building. But I don't know. I just love them all.
I think I'm like you. I can pull something I like about each and every game on our shelves, at least the ones we've played, because like many other collectors, we have lots of games on our shelves that we haven't played yet.
Yeah, we kind of buy them faster than we can learn them.
As tends to be the case for most. You like Euro games a lot, and that is definitely right up your alley. It's just kind of how your mind is geared. I do like Euro games, but I think those Ameritrash games, where you got the guys, you're moving them around on the map, chucking dice, going on adventures, maybe fighting each other. Unless we're talking Risk, those are my kind of games right there. We also enjoy a lot of brewed beverages, whether it be coffee, tea, beer, liquor. I know you have your favorites. You're definitely more of a coffee gal.
Yes, coffee is at the top of my list. Little bit of a tea snob, having worked at a tea shop in my younger days.
That one time for 6 months, I worked in a tea shop.
I know, 6 months of working in a tea shop, and now I'm like, loose leaf is the only way to go.
Yeah, I know you're not big on as much liquor, and I know you're definitely not a huge fan of beer. That's more where I'm at with the liquor and the beer. So I think this is a good balance we have going here.
Yeah, I think we have kind of the best of all worlds.
So Jess and I are going to pour ourselves a cup of Morning Liftoff by Sci-Fi Coffee. When we come back, we'll be taking a deep look into Alien Fate of the Nostromo. But first, let us get to know Sci-Fi Coffee and Morning Liftoff a little better. Morning Liftoff is a full-bodied dark roast coffee brought to you by Sci-Fi Coffee. Getting their start just last year, the founders of Sci-Fi Coffee have been inspired to blend their love of coffee with their nerdy sci-fi interests. With roots out of the Midwest, where many fictional and perhaps even non-fictional outerworldly encounters have taken place, their goal is to be a space for next-level creativity in storytelling and world-building, and they want that world to include next-level coffee. Morning Liftoff is brewed to the delicious level of bold, which, if you don't know, is the most intense level of dark roast coffee. With such an intense roast, you'll typically find strong flavors of earth and smoke with sweet undertones and a lot of bitterness either in the aftertaste of every sip or within the flavor of the coffee itself. And while bold roast gives you the most out of your coffee in the flavor department, the bitterness makes it an acquired taste for most. Morning Liftoff, however, offers something a little different. The master roaster for Sci-Fi Coffee draws on 18 years of experience selecting beans sourced from locations all over the world. This bold brew combines a washed bean variety sourced from Honduras and a natural bean variety from Brazil. The difference between the two is how much of the outer layer of the coffee bean is kept intact during the roasting process. By mixing the two together just right, Morning Liftoff has maintained all the wonderful strong flavors of a bold roast while eliminating much of the bitterness. The natural Brazil bean is the key here. With the bitterness heavily tampered down, the nutty flavor of the bean is accentuated and gives the coffee an amazingly smooth body with notes of chocolate, toasted marshmallow, and walnut. The Sci-Fi Coffee team have named their various blends after some of the hallmarks of science fiction. Morning Liftoff is, of course, a reference to the themes of intergalactic travel so prevalent within the genre. The bold flavor of this blend is also especially good for waking up in the morning, ready for liftoff, as it were. Freshness is of utmost importance as well. Their current process uses a Loring roaster, able to roast between 18 and 75 pounds of coffee, usually in about 12 to 15 minutes. Blends are roasted as orders come in, generally the day of. This means that at the time of delivery, your coffee is usually only a few days out from when it was roasted. Hard to find beans much fresher than that. To learn more about how to get yourself a bag of Morning Liftoff or any of the other blends by Sci-Fi Coffee, visit their website at sci-fi-coffee.com. That's sci-fi with a dash coffee.com.
A perfect organism. Its structural perfection is matched only by its hostility.
An alien stalks the corridors of the commercial starship Nostromo, hunting you and your crewmates. Work together to move through the ship, gather supplies, and craft items to survive. Proceed carefully. The alien could be just around the corner. And remember, in space, no one can hear you scream. Alien Fate of the Nostromo is a 1 to 5 player cooperative game. It plays in about 45 to 60 minutes and is recommended for ages 10 and up. So this is basically a retelling of the film from '79. You get to retell how the story plays out, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, it gives you a lot of options to sort of play with different endings. And you're watching a horror movie, you're looking at it and you're like, oh, why don't you do this? Or you should obviously go into that room, or just kill that chick, she's dumb and useless. Oh, Lambert. But
so the game starts with you playing as one of the 5 members of the ship. Now this doesn't include Ash because he's a villain in this game. He's already known to be a villain by the time this game starts, and Kane, who's already dead. So the game takes place sometime after Kane dies. And so you take up one of the roles of either Parker, Dallas, Lambert, Brett, and of course Ripley. And you start your adventure in the kitchen of the game. And then from there, you have a lot of different things that you can do.
So on your turn, you get a certain number of actions. Most of the characters, it's 4. One character's 3, one's 5. Basically, you can move yourself from one space to another. Most of the spaces are rooms in the spaceship, but then they have kind of corridors between them. So it can take a while if you're using your actions to move one space to really get from one room to another. You can pick items up, or you can use your scrap to craft an item, or you can use the items that you have.
You can also use the items.
One of the cool things about the game, it's pretty typical, I guess, for a co-op, is that each character has their own special ability. So who you play with can make a really big difference in the outcome. If you're playing with your whole crew, then, you have all of the abilities at your disposal. But if you're playing a 2 or 3 player game and you only have Ripley and Brett or Parker and Dallas, that's really going to impact the outcome of your game.
Right, and each ability does something a little different. One of the characters will make you a scrap, which we'll talk about in a little bit. One of the characters has 5 moves, whereas everyone else only has 3 or 4. Another guy can make things for really cheap.
Ripley can actually move other characters on her turn, which is appropriate, I think, for Ripley, because she's pretty much running the show in the whole movie.
Yeah, I would agree to that. So you start out in the kitchen, and using your character's abilities, you now have to run around the ship and complete your missions. The missions will be drawn from a small deck of mission cards at the start of the game. You draw them out, depending on the number of players you have, will depend on the missions you need to complete. Most of the time, they're basically just make an item, bring it over here, or take an item and bring it over there, for the most part.
Now, the items in the game are, for the most part, they're items that you can use against the alien. Weapons that you've seen in the movie. There's some stuff that's not so weapony, but has unique game abilities, like a flashlight that somehow prevents you from taking damage from the alien, which I guess sort of makes sense. It's like, you can see him coming, so...
Well, I don't know. When Dallas turned that flashlight onto the alien, it didn't go so well for him when he was in the duct.
That's true.
After you take your turn, you draw a card from the alien encounter deck, and that card will determine how far the alien moves, how much damage he does. This encounter deck's kind of cool because it's designed to get harder as the game goes. So you start with a lot of cards called All Quiet, and the alien moves maybe one space, and you get some items thrown on the board. But then you also have cards that will be called Hunt or Stalk, and that allows the alien to move much greater distances and do much heavier damage.
And then there's also the, Order 973 or something.
937.
937 cards. And those cards are where Ash will kick in. In the game, you have the option to actually have Ash as a character on the board, but whether or not his character piece is on the board, his cards still come into play. And those are cards where Ash is screwing with the mission. He's taking your scrap, which in this game, scrap is your kind of currency. It's the universal material that you use to build all the other items.
And Ash is really after your scrap. The alien's after that ass, but Ash wants your scrap. And if his character's on the board, as he moves around, with his cards getting drawn or not, as he moves, he's going to take your scrap if you're not careful. So he adds a layer to the game. Like Jess said, he's optional, but I think he's necessary personally. You're going to draw these cards out of this deck, and I said they get harder as the game progresses. There's a card in the deck that when you draw it, you have to shuffle all the alien hunt and stock cards as well as all of the Ash cards back into the deck, but you leave out all those all quiet ones. There are little encounter tokens in the shape of like room doors on the spaceship that get scattered throughout the game as the game progresses through many different means, sometimes through cards, other times just through effects, what have you. You flip these things over, and a lot of the times it's just an empty room and you're all clear, but sometimes you flip it over and it's an alien. And so then the alien moves from wherever he is to that room, and then you automatically lose morale, and then you have to run away from the alien, and it can make it a lot more tricky.
Yeah, it can really get in the way of accomplishing your mission if you're trying to get to a certain room and suddenly you have to run away, or actually it can be used to your advantage a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. You can use the alien to move around faster than you could on your normal turn.
So your damage meter in this game is measured in morale. So you don't have individual characters getting hurt and potentially dying and the rest of the team lives on. You have one set of morale as a group, and when the alien does damage, your morale goes down. Now, there are certain items that you can use, like we said, the flashlight, that can reduce the amount of damage that you take, but there's no way to rebuild that morale once you've had it taken away. And it's not a very big measurement.
And as the game goes on, that morale is more and more at stake because the alien's deck gets stronger and stronger when all the good cards, for lack of a better word, are taken out of it. The goal here is to work together to complete your missions as fast as possible, utilizing the items you have and the character abilities you have. But once you're done with all your missions, you're not finished yet.
So each game has a final mission. There's a few different options, so you kind of shuffle and get a random one. You don't know what you're going to get. And that is one last, much more difficult mission that you have to accomplish before beating the alien. So I've played this and made the mistake of you get through all of the first missions and you just feel relief. Like, oh, we did it. And then you realize you have 3 morale left.
And the final mission's still to go.
Yeah.
The final missions usually get you to rearrange the board somehow. You have to reshuffle cards, or your characters are placed here, or items are rescattered, or the alien moves, or if you have to take on Ash, which is one of the final missions, he gets repositioned and his role in the game changes. And so it changes up your game plan a little bit because you were working on getting items over here and there, but now you have to be in certain places when the alien's in a certain place here. And so you're working together in a different way when the final mission comes around.
Most of the missions come with a timer element to them.
Right. The self-destruct mechanism from the movie.
Yes.
And so you have about 4 turns until the self-destruct sequence activates, much like in the film. But if you can hold on and complete that final mission, congratulations, you have changed the fate of the Nostromo, and you and your crew have beaten the alien, and you ride off into the, well, sunset, I guess not appropriate for space, but you ride off into the galaxy heroes. That's essentially the game. That's how it works, and that's how you win. So, Jess, I like this film a lot. And when I got the game, I basically didn't know anything about it. You remember, it was a shut up and take my money moment because I'm such a fan of the film Alien. I was like, yeah, I'll play a board game about Alien. And when I saw it was made by Ravensburger, we have a couple of Ravensburger games on our shelves, you know. I got to say, it didn't disappoint.
No, not at all. This game builds the tension of the movie so well. Even though it kind of starts in the middle of the tension, it builds so much because, like you were saying, that engine with the cards.
Yeah.
It starts out kind of easy. It's quiet. You're sneaking around and you know he's here, but you don't know where.
He's very easily avoidable at the beginning of the game because he doesn't move much.
So you've got a little bit of time to prepare yourself, get your weapons together, kind of figure out a game plan. Then all of a sudden it gets hard and suddenly he's just popping up every turn. He's attacking you, just like in the movie.
Now, when we first played this, we lost pretty bad. In fact, I think the first 2 or 3 times we played this, we lost pretty bad. Mostly that was us just not being familiar with the game.
The items play a really strong part in this game, actually. And I think that was one of the mistakes we made in our earlier games. We were only making the items that the missions required.
Right.
But they're actually very useful just to have and use.
I agree. Now let's talk about the missions themselves. Most of them, like we said, you just make an item, you pick it up, you take it over here. You get to keep the item with you, which is pretty cool. You just need to bring it to the room. So, you create like a motion tracker and bring it to the galley or whatever. But now there are 2 missions in the game that can make it really brutally hard, especially if you have a higher player count, because they require you to meet in one room all at the same time. One of them requires you to meet in the same room at the same time, each holding a piece of scrap. This can get really hard when Ash is taking your scrap. About every 2 or 3 cards out of that deck, you pull an Ash card. And if you don't have scrap to give him, he's going to take morale. and you already have the alien taking morale. Those missions are a real pain because the alien's chasing you. And every time the alien lands on one of your spaces, you have to retreat. So if the alien makes its way into the room that all you guys are trying to meet in and everyone has to scatter, you now have to try to get the alien out of that room and meet back in that room again. And it's really tough. It can be really tough.
Yeah, you have to time it out right and make sure that somebody is kind of bait for the alien until everyone else can get in there.
Right.
It's like you said, otherwise the alien's going to go in there and everyone's going to be scattered.
I personally, depending on the player count, will, for me, depend on whether or not I even want to play those missions. Because this game does get harder the more people you have. Because for each player you have, that's one additional mission you have to complete. For a 2-player game, you have to complete 3 missions. For a 3-player game, 4, and so on.
And those are just the basic missions. You still have to do the final mission on top of that. One of the cool things about it is you can kind of set your difficulty level, or I mean, you could if you didn't randomize the missions and you chose them specifically.
Right.
But depending what missions you get, it could be a lot easier or a lot harder.
The less players you have, the easier the game gets. It lets you play solo, but I got to tell you, I've played solo games on this just to try it out. I beat the game once in 7 minutes.
Yeah, it's definitely, I don't think, designed to be a solo game. I mean, it's great that you have the option, but I think it's a lot more fun when you have more crew members.
I think they developed some rules that do help solo play. It's called the Director's Cut rules, and they're posted on Board Game Geek. You can go to them, and the rules are pretty brutal. Like, if you had to play these rule set with, 4 people, I don't know if you could do it. You start the game with 1 item less at your disposal. You lose scrap a lot faster. Ash moves when the alien moves instead of moving when the card tells him to.
And when you say 1 item less, you mean 1 of each item.
Yeah, like when the game starts, you have an inventory. That inventory is cut in half. And even if you're playing solo, you have 4 missions you have to complete. And if you're not playing solo, so in a regular game, if the alien lands on a space occupied by 2 people, you just lose the morale 1 time, depending on what the card says. But in the Director's Cut, you lose that morale times the number of players in that space. So if you have a mission in which you're all trying to meet somewhere, and you got 3 or 4 of your guys there, and then the alien lands in that space, I mean, it's basically game over.
Game over, man. It's game over.
Yeah, it sounds impossible, which is crazy because this is already, it's a co-op game. So by nature, they're generally really hard.
Yeah, they're not designed to be easy.
Yeah, it's not a game where you can expect to win every time.
One of the other things I also liked about this game a lot is the way it looks. It's a good-looking game.
Oh, yeah, and it looks a lot like the movie.
It really does. Like, they didn't do a lot of bright, flashy colors. They kept it dull and gritty, just like in the film. And the other thing I really like is when you open up the box, the side of the board that has the picture of Jonesy hissing at you. As soon as you open the box, bam, there's Jonesy. It's pretty cool.
It really sets the tone right away.
But the figures are cool, too. Like, that alien mini is awesome with the tail and everything. And the minis could be painted if you want, but I think as is, they look pretty good. They got the details of the characters really well.
Yeah, I mean, the poses are a little weird. I don't know why Dallas is crouching, but I mean, it gives it a little bit of character, a little flavor.
It does, and they all kind of are doing something different in their poses and stuff. It kind of reminds me of the old action figures, from back in the day, where each of them kind of posed in their little display case.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, this is a good-looking game. It relies heavily on that weird green color from Alien. The ship is gray, and again, nothing flashy, but it works because it reminds you of the film. It puts you in that place and time that the characters were in against the alien.
Pretty much the only thing I don't like about this game is also something I kind of love about this game. I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with Ash.
Okay.
The character infuriates me because he gets stuck and he'll get stuck in the way of somewhere you have to be. And you can't do anything until one of his cards comes up. And then you end up having to lose all your scrap, or everybody loses a scrap. That frustrates me when you get stuck and you can't do anything.
I swear to you, every time we play, it's like, okay, we need to gather 4 scrap, because it's not the easiest thing to gather in the game, we should note. We need to gather 4 scrap to make an incinerator, right? One of the more expensive items. and you finally have it, and okay, on my next turn, I'm going to be able to make it, or I can give it to you and you can make it, and then you draw the card that says the current player loses all scrap. It seems, when we play anyway, whenever we got all the scrap we need, that card comes out. And there's only one card in that deck that does that, and yet it always seems to pop up because that's one of the cards you reshuffle in when you do the reshuffling. Yeah, Ash is annoying.
But also, I don't know, you gotta have Ash, though, because Ash.
My complaints about the game are a little more nitpicky, just because I'm such a fan of the film. There are things that they use in the game, and again, this is real nitpicky stuff. I don't think anyone else but me is going to care. But there are elements of the game. One of the final missions is called We'll Blow It Out into Space. Now, this is me nerding out, but it strips away the power of that particular scene, because Ripley doesn't say we'll blow it out into space. She says we'll blow that fucker out into space. Again, most people aren't going to care. Most people who play this game probably aren't old enough to have watched Alien anyway. I mean, the movie's, 45 years old almost?
Oh, it's a classic, though. Everyone's seen it.
It is a classic movie, but still, like, little things like that. My thing is, like, if you're not going to go all the way, then you probably shouldn't go at all.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of ways you can't go all the way because it's just a different medium. I mean, that's
Sure,
something they could do, but there's a lot of stuff. I mean, you could say that about a lot of different aspects.
That's fair. And so it's not going to be like an overarching like critique of like, oh, I won't play this game because it doesn't do that. But that's kind of like my little weird thing. A lot of people I read online, their biggest problem with the game was that the characters don't die like they do in the film. You either win together or you lose together.
That kind of makes sense, but at the same time, in a co-op game, like if you're wanting to be true to the movie, yeah. But if you're wanting to play a game that everyone enjoys, it's not really fun when you die and no longer get to participate.
Yeah.
So there's other games that do that where the characters actually die, and the way they kind of solve that problem is by you get to pick up a new character. But there's only 5 characters in this game.
Right.
So, and there's only, 7 in the movie. So
you're pretty limited on characters in this one. Yeah.
Exactly. And if everybody dies, that's it. Like, or if everyone but one person dies, like whoever plays Ripley, she's going to have an awesome time. But everyone else, they're just like waiting for it to be over because they don't get to play anymore.
Right. Yeah, I'm not bothered too much by the fact that the characters don't die. If somebody could come up with like a way to do it, like house rules kind of way to do it, I'd give it a try.
Yeah.
Just do like an endurance mode, see who can survive the alien the longest. But yeah, it's not crucial to this game.
Yeah. Oh, there was one mechanic that was a little bit funky. Well, it's not even a mechanic. It was just a circumstance we found ourselves in. But as many times as we've played this, and it's only happened a couple of times, it's probably not that big of a deal. But it's a little annoying when you find yourself in a situation where you have more actions to spend, but you can't actually do anything. Or you could move to the next room, but you need to be in the room that you're in. Or really, that's pretty much it. The only thing you would be able to do. Or if you're Ripley, you could move somebody else, but you don't really want to move anybody else because they're all exactly where they need to be. And so now you've wasted your actions, which is frustrating because even though you didn't use all your actions, the alien still takes their turn.
Right. That card's coming. That card's getting drawn. I mean, no matter what.
Right. Exactly.
Now, I do want to discuss the elephant in the room when it comes to this game, is the fact that people do compare it a lot to the game Nemesis. And I've never played Nemesis. I know you haven't either. But I do know that the Nemesis game started out as an Alien game. And for whatever reason, from what I understand, they couldn't get the rights. And so they had to alter it a bunch to make it its own thing without being sued. So they changed. If you look at the aliens, you can tell, like, oh, that's supposed to be aliens. But they alter them just enough so that they can call it their own thing. I have never played Nemesis, but I do know the premise of the game really well. I would not compare Fate of the Nostromo to Nemesis at all. I mean, other than the fact that, it was supposed to be an alien game. I compare it to Horrified. Like almost 100%. This game reminds me of Horrified. which makes sense because it's the same company.
Yeah, it's Ravensburger. It's a co-op. Just like in Horrified, every character has a special ability. Just like in Horrified, you are picking up items and taking them to places to accomplish various missions. Yeah, it's pretty similar.
Ravensburger here has a formula, and they are sticking to it with this one. If you didn't like Horrified, I guess you wouldn't like this game. You know, and thinking about like Nemesis, because the thing with Nemesis is people can die, and there's secret traitor things because every character has their own objective. I'm actually kind of glad, as much as like, you know, the Horrified similarities are very strong in this game. I mean, it's not a complete reskinning. It's Alien is still its own game, but like you do feel the Horrified thing going on when you play this. But I think I'm glad Ravensburger got a hold of it and not Nemesis, because I can't imagine the characters in Alien, you know, turning on each other like that. Like, obviously you have Ash, who ends up being a dick, but for the most part, all the other characters stay together. And so in Nemesis, you're telling the story where they backstab each other. I just don't think Hudson stabs Ripley in the back. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think if you did see that, well, I mean, it's just a game, but still, it's, I don't know. It's just kind of contrary to the story. And you're like, hey, would never do that, you know?
Right. And again, we were talking about those kind of nitpicky things, you know, like how much of a pain Ash can be, or the fact that they didn't quote the movie right. But honestly, I think that's a lot more tolerable. In fact, tolerable to the point where you wouldn't even know this, compared to if, you know, Ripley was stabbing Dallas in the back to like make the escape pod instead, you know?
Yeah, I think it needs to be said that, yeah, it's a really similar mechanic as Horrified, but it's very much a unique game, and it's very true to the movie in the ways that count.
Yeah, it does build that tension. It does make you feel like you're isolated and alone as that alien moves around the ship more, and as Ash dashes your hopes of making items and stuff. It really does take that movie tension that we, you know, all remember from the film, and just it puts it on the board, which is really impressive.
Yeah, I mean, it gives Lambert a purpose, but
Dude, she was so useless in that movie. But overall, though, I'd say solid game.
Yeah, oh, definitely. It's a great game. It's a great tension builder. It's a great reminder and homage to the movie.
I would recommend it if you like the Alien franchise. I would recommend it if you like the Horrified concept. I'd recommend it if you are looking for a game that builds tension but isn't too hard to figure out. It doesn't have as many moving parts as some other co-ops, but it has enough there that it will keep you entertained and thinking and panicked at the right moment. I think it does a good job at all of that, and I would recommend it on your shelves. Jess, what about you?
I would agree with all of that. If you like cooperative games especially, I would say this is a game for you. Unless you're one of those weird masochist people who just like never wants to win, then this might be too easy for you. I don't know. Try the director's cut rules.
Right. They are on Board Game Geek. You can check it out. If you have some masochism in you, have at it. So now, before we wrap up the show, we have to talk about Morning Liftoff by Sci-Fi Coffee. Give our thoughts and opinions on it. Now that we've had the whole show to have a cup or two of it, right off the bat, I like this coffee. I'm a fan.
Yeah, me too. There's something about it. It must be with the mix of the washed and the natural beans.
Yeah.
It's got that dark flavor, but it doesn't kick you in the face with bitterness.
Yeah, the bitterness kind of is behind every sip. So it's a nice aftertaste, especially since you do have those hints of that. I don't know if it's in there, but it does taste like marshmallow and some sort of toasted like walnut.
I get the walnut. I don't get the marshmallow.
You don't get it?
No.
I see. It's right in there with the bitterness, I think.
No, I mean, it's a little bit smooth, but it's not marshmallow to me.
No?
No, but I don't know. Maybe I just have a layman's palate or something.
I don't know. Everybody tastes something different in that regard, but there is a smoothness to it, and the bitterness in the aftertaste is very nice. It's what you want out of a dark coffee without being kind of like overwhelming.
Yeah.
So you do get this nice flavor, you get this nice aroma, and it goes down pretty smooth. I'm a fan of this. This is a dark roast done right. I think the wash, the half wash, half unwashed, does have something to do with it. I know you prefer creamer in every cup of coffee, but does it mix well with the creamer of your choice?
Yeah, I think this actually blended really beautifully with the, what is it that I use? It's the Natural Bliss hazelnut creamer.
Yeah. So
it's got kind of a real milk flavor in it, not so much that artificial.
Yeah.
So anyway, that blended really nicely, I thought, with this coffee. And I read in the description, it's got a chocolate hint in the flavor, and the creamer, I thought, really brought that chocolate out.
Does it bring it out? Yeah, because drinking it black, because like I've done both, and I've drank more black of this, so I don't quite remember the hazelnut mix, but it would bring out chocolate hints, which I'm not getting too much in the black, like just by itself. I can tell there's something there. Maybe that's what it is, but if it does bring out more in the hazelnut, that's awesome.
Yeah, I felt like it really brought the chocolate out, and with the hazelnut, it's almost like, I mean, it's not Nutella, but
yeah,
it's just a nice.
Well, you wouldn't want the Nutella flavor in your coffee. Even with like the hazelnut creamer, you wouldn't want that weird Nutella flavor. It's really strong if you're not used to it.
Yeah, it works. It's just a subtle hazelnut, kind of brings out the chocolate. It makes it kind of a mocha almost. And
Nice.
It's nice.
So Jess, tell me, Sci-Fi Coffee's Morning Liftoff, do you recommend it for people's shelves?
Yeah, I would say if you like a dark roast, but you don't like a whole lot of bitterness, it's definitely got that low acidity, which is a great feature of a dark roast. It's smooth. If you like cream in your coffee, or even if you don't, it's good either way. I would definitely recommend this.
I highly recommend this as well, especially if you're like a fan of medium roast and you're looking to expand your palate into something a little stronger, a little darker. This is going to be a nice, mild, dark roast that isn't going to kick you right in the nuts right away if you aren't used to those darker flavors. Definitely get this on your shelves. That's Morning Liftoff by Sci-Fi Coffee. Highly recommended here at Board Games and Brews. Check them out. All right, that's going to wrap it up for our very first episode. Thank you so much for listening. Today we covered Alien, Fate of the Nostromo, and Morning Liftoff by Sci-Fi Coffee, and we recommend them both. Jess, this has been a fun first episode.
Definitely super fun. Really excited to do more of these with you.
And hopefully you had fun listening as well. When we do come back, we'll have another game and brew for you. It's going to be a lot of fun. Thank you so much again. Jess, I will catch you at the table next time. This has been Social Proximity, a Board Games and Brews podcast. We'll catch you later.